Hello and good day. This is the Bible Bard. A bard is a storyteller who recites traditional texts in the past associated with a particular oral tradition. And I'm here to recite and to amplify what the literature of the Bible says about who is God and who are human beings. And here's the place we're at today. There is a famous prophet in the Bible named Balaam. You can find his story in Numbers chapter 22 to 24, who's also known from an archaeological discovery in 1967 at Tel Deir Allah in the Jordan Valley. This is east of the Jordan River. This tell, or archaeological mound, is next to the present-day village of that same name, and it's a little southeast of Amman, Jordan, who's the capital. The inscription found in this site is about Balaam, is dated to 770 BC, somewhere in Iron Age 2, or about 3,000 years ago. Now, this fellow, Balaam, who is talked about on this site, also appears, of course, in this biblical account near the end of Moses' life, around the mid to late 15th century BCE, or the late Bronze Age, or about 3,500 years ago. And when they opened this site up, on a huge wall, they found an inscription. It's in an entirely painted wall panel, maybe 2 to 3 meters, 6 to 9 feet wide, and includes maybe 120 to 150 lines of original text. The wall is part of an ancient religious shrine. About 60 to 70 lines of the inscription are readable today, and it is one of the longest prophetic inscriptions known from the ancient Near East. But it is about the equivalent of 40 to 70 biblical verses. And although the original text was written in plaster, earthquakes over the centuries have destroyed about 50-60% of the original inscription. Now, archaeology tells us that this biblical character, Balaam, was known in ancient times in the Transjordan region as a pagan visionary who operated in a polytheistic religious environment. This site, totally independent of the Bible, Balaam is known as a powerful seer, the inscription says, who received nighttime visions from divine beings. The inscription on the wall provides independent corroboration of the biblical story. And I've reproduced the biblical account in a link for you, so you can click the link in the comments and get a PDF that opens so you can read the story in the book of Numbers if you'd like to follow along. Discussion. This prophet Balaam is mentioned in several Bible verses as an archetypical religious enemies of the ancient Hebrews. Balaam was employed by the kings of Moab and Midian in the Bible story to curse the people of Israel as their tribes waited by the Jordan River before crossing over to invade the land of Canaan and destroy the current inhabitants and make the area their own. It's a literary practice to begin at the end of all the biblical pronouncements about Balaam and move backwards to uncover the biblical attitude toward this character, and we'll do the same. So we begin in the back of the Bible at Revelation 2:14, and that text reads as follows, quote, "There are some among you," the writer is speaking to Christians in a church, "who hold the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak, the king of Moab, to entice the Israelites to sin so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality." Now, comment, when Balaam was not allowed by God to curse the Hebrews, he resorted to a tactic of creating a sinful temptation, which, when the Hebrews committed this act of sin, would cause the holy God of Israel to destroy them himself. In the next verse, as we move backwards, Jude 11, we hear this text, quote, "Woe to them the writer is speaking about people who have fallen away from the correct view of Jesus Christ. And he says, woe to them. They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error. They have been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. So 3 Old Testament characters are mentioned, and Balaam is the central one. And he has an error, the writer says. A comment says that this guy Balaam tried to please his patron Balak, king of Moab, to help him defeat the Hebrews. And his motive, Balaam's motive, was he wanted the money he was promised if he would do this. Now moving again backwards toward the Old Testament, and get to 2 Peter 2, verses 15 and 16. And here Peter writes, quote, they, he's speaking of certain religious teachers of his day, they have left the straight way and wandered off to follow the way of Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of wickedness. But he was rebuked for his wrongdoing by a donkey, an animal without speech, who spoke with a human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. Comment. This way that Peter speaks of is a common motive in all ages of disingenuous religious people who use their position to make money from the gullible. Now let's move to the Bible story of Balaam in Numbers. Balaam is described as a non-Jewish prophet. This is a pagan guy, a soothsayer or a diviner who in his professional capacity knows that Jehovah God exists and is God, and is yet still willing to oppose the Hebrew God to make money. In the Bible story, Balaam's willingness to curse the people of God for profit is prevented when God compels Balaam not to curse the people, but to pronounce blessings instead. And if you look in that story, it's wonderful, where 3 times Balaam tries to curse but ends up blessing. And when prevented from getting paid for cursing, Balaam comes up with another way to subvert the Hebrews. He instructs his patron to seduce the Israelites into sin so that God himself will destroy them. This is smart, knowable religious advice, which many of the Hebrews fell for, and resulted in judgment from God that killed over 24,000 of the people, according to the Bible story. Summary: the story of Balaam is long and complicated with several subtexts. For our purposes, let's focus on what the Bible teaches us about God and about people. First, the Bible says God is holy, and he cannot change this divine component of his nature. God must judge sin. And when Balaam instructs the Moabites and the Midianites to entice the Hebrews into idolatry and sexual immorality, he is trying to use God's holiness against the people to accomplish his patron's purpose, which is to destroy the people so they cannot invade the land of Canaan. Second, we learn that even well-trained, godly people like the Hebrews, who just spent 40 years learning to obey their God, and yet they are easily deceived if attractive religious doctrines accompanied by good-looking and willing women are bandied in front of them. You can burn in your lust for the good times, especially when they've been approved by your religion, but you will come to a bad end, for you are opposing God. As a religious teacher, what did Balaam possess? This fellow had religious insight, but he wasn't righteous. He was spiritually gifted, but he didn't obey God. Balaam's greed was greater than his desire for truth. To get his way, he was willing to deliberately corrupt others to their destruction. He was bent on using his religious office for personal gain. And as we read and absorb this literature, the Bible presents us with stories that provide instructions about God and ourselves. Biblical stories like this one of Balaam are full of details which in this case are corroborated by modern archaeological discoveries. The storybook in the Bible is not fiction, but historical facts written for our benefit, as says 1 Corinthians 10, verse 11, which reads, quote, "These things happened to them," in the stories of the Hebrew Scriptures, "as examples, and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the culmination of the ages has come." That's from the NIV. Conclusion. This is the way the Bible Bard works. Brief recitations are closely focused. No distractions, no rabbit trails. We're talking about what the literature of the Bible states, the ideas and concepts it presents, because most people have never engaged with biblical thought. Make up your own mind whether you agree or disagree with the Bible's pronouncements. But after watching or listening to a podcast episode, you can go to www.biblebard.org to download a transcript of the podcast so you can review and read the content of the podcast. You can also support the Bible Bard on Patreon. As little as $1 a week or $5 a month helps to cover the costs of the podcast. And you can give at GoFundMe or the Bible Bard website donation tab. The Bible Bard himself takes no salary and does not financially benefit from the gifts of supporters to the ministry. You can send the Bible Bard any remarks or questions you care to offer to BibleBardUS@gmail.com. Glad to hear from you. And thanks in advance for following and sharing the Bible Bard content. And remember, the Bible Bard podcast is translated into other languages, including Swahili, Chagua, Spanish, Hindi, Nepali, Bengali, and Urdu, with other languages in development. So listen to us on the audio podcast platforms or find us on the video podcast platforms. Until next time, this is the Bible Bard.